All right, we've reached the final section for this course. Section 8.8, Inequalities in Two Variables. What we're going to do is graph this inequality. It's a linear inequality because it's got the two variables x and y. And we're going to do this the same way that we do graph lines. You're going to solve it for y, get 3 points, and plot the points. There's a few differences. The first thing is right here. When you're solving for y, remember, when you multiply or divide by a negative, you must change the direction of the inequality sign. So this is the inequality sign, a greater than or less than. If you multiply or divide by a negative number, you've got to flip it good. Okay? So just remember to flip that inequality. That's the first problem. The next thing is you need to decide whether the line you're going to graph is going to be a solid line or a dotted line. Well, when you have no equal sign with your inequality, then it's going to be a dotted line. When you have an equal sign drawn underneath your inequality, it's going to be a solid line. And then the last difference between graphing our lines is that you now need to shade one of the two sides of that line. You're going to shade above the line when the inequality contains a greater than, and below the line when the inequality contains a less than. So I'll do one example of each type. Notice the directions. Solve in each inequality for y, that's step 1. Find your 3 points, and then graph. The solving remains the same. Get rid of the x, divide by y. Just remember when you flip or don't flip. Okay? So I'm going to subtract the x. That's going to give me 2y greater than 6 minus x. Remember the number in front of that x there. Divide everything by positive 2. Since I'm dividing by a positive number, I do not flip the inequality, and that becomes y greater than 3 minus 1/2 x. Okay, so you've solved for y. Now we're going to find our 3 points. We do that the same as if it were a line, just a regular equation. As a matter of fact, when we find the points, we're going to change that inequality symbol to an equal sign. So y equals 3 minus 1/2 times 0. 3 minus 0 is just the point 0, 3. We're going to graph that as normal. Start at the origin, move up 3. Right about there. Find our next point. 3 minus 1/2 times 1 gives me 3 minus 1/2, which is 2.5. So start at the origin, 1 to the right, up 2.5. It's about right there. And now plug in 2. Y equals 3 minus 1/2 times 2 is 3 minus 1, or 2. Start at the origin, to the right 2, and up 2. Okay, so that's all the same as before. What changes now is whether or not I'm going to choose a solid line or a dotted line. So look back to your inequality that you've solved for y. Notice there's no equal sign under there, so this is going to be a dotted line. So dot the line all the way across the graph through those points. Make it a clearly dotted line. And then the last step is to decide, am I going to shade the top of the graph or below the graph? Above the line, below the line. Okay, well look at the inequality that you've solved for y. That's greater than, okay, that's a greater than. That means we're going to shade above. So you're going to shade the entire side of the line that we consider above. And that's graphing an inequality. Let's do one more example. Okay, here's our last example. Solve the inequality for y. This is supposed to have a greater than or equal to in here. Okay, so we're going to add 2x to both sides. So negative 1y greater than or equal to 6 plus 2x. I'm going to divide by a negative 1. Since I am dividing an inequality by a negative, remember that what we're going to do now is flip the direction of that. So instead of being greater than or equal to, it becomes less than or equal to. 6 divided by negative 1 is negative 6. 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2x. So there's my inequality solved for y. Now find your 3 points. Remember, we just substitute 0, 1, and 2, just like we have all along. Change the inequality to an equals at this point. So y equals negative 6 minus 2 times 0. Y equals negative 6 minus 0, which is just negative 6. Plug in 1. Negative 6 minus 2 times 1, well, that's negative 6 minus 2, that's negative 8. Last point, y equals negative 6 minus 2 times 2, well, that's negative 6 minus 4, which is negative 10. Let's plot those 3 points. Start at the origin, 0 left or right, down 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right there. Next point. Start at the origin, move to the right 1 and down 8. Start at the origin, move 2 to the right and down 10. Okay, now you've plotted your points. You need to decide whether the line going through those points is going to be a solid or dotted line. Look to your inequality that's solved for y. It has the equal sign under it. It will be a solid line. So connect the dots with a solid line all the way across the graph. And now decide whether I'm going to shade above the line or below the line. Well, this is less than, so it's shade below. And that completes section 8.8.